What's up, Geminites? GemMint here. Today we're going to talk about all the different types of labels offered by CGC, and we're going to explain the differences. So stay tuned. Alright, a lot of people have been requesting this video, so I'm happy to deliver. When I went online to start searching for the different types of labels, I noticed that CGC had a pretty good explanation on their website that gives a good breakdown. I'm going to credit CGC's website for a lot of this information, but there's also stuff that I pulled from other sources to make this video. Before I get started into the different types of labels and the different colors, I want to talk about the grading scale. If you notice, CGC and all graded companies have a number on the top left of the label. So the grading scale is based off of the original way that you graded comic books back in the day. So looking at this scale, you can see that the lowest condition is poor, then you have fair, then you have fair/good, then you have good minus, then you have good, good plus, and so on. If you notice, a 10 is GemMint, which is where I got my name from. So that's the scale, and what CGC did was put a number to correspond with that type of condition. They kind of revolutionized the game when they did this as well, because now a lot of people will say, oh, is that a 9.8? Which is really saying, is that a near mint/mint book? So that's the grading scale. That's what the number means on the top left. Before CGC came around, you had to know how to grade yourself or take the dealer's word for it. Now, do you think the person selling you the book is going to give you an honest grade? Some would and some wouldn't. So what CGC is and what it provides, it's a third party. It's not the seller telling you the condition of the book. It's a third party, so that these two parties can make an even trade based on what this company says. Completely revolutionized the entire game with their grading scale and the way that we collect comics. Man, if it wasn't for CGC, we'd be in the 90s with all these variants and all these multiple printings, and CGC made it easy to quantify how much each book is worth in each grade. So anyway, that's the grading scale. So the first label we're going to look at is the one that is most commonly seen. It's the blue label. It's called Universal Grade, and this means that this book was graded as is. There was nothing done to it. Nobody signed it. Nobody tried to make any enhancements to it. It is unrestored. This is the book in its natural state. Blue label is probably the most sought out after label of all the ones that we're going to discuss. It's the most common, what I prefer when I collect comics. Then we're going to jump over to yellow label. Yellow label is their signature series label. This means that this book was signed and it was witnessed by somebody from CGC. So this is usually done at conventions, could also be done at private signings. But basically, CGC will not use certificate of authenticity or any kind of picture or reference. If they're not there to witness that signature, they will not credit the name on the book. So with this example here, you can see that it was signed by Stan Lee on June 23rd of 2016. CGC was there. They witnessed it. It's legit. So what does green label mean? Green label, which means it's a qualified grade, it could mean a couple of things. Green label can mean that somebody signed this book, but it wasn't witnessed by CGC. So if you had Stan Lee sign this book because you went to his house and knocked on his door and he signed it, and then you sent it to CGC, they're not going to confirm or verify that Stan Lee signed that. They don't know who signed it. So it'll just say name written on cover, and it won't affect the grade. It'll be graded as if there was no signature, but it'll get a green label, and it'll just say name written on cover. It won't say Stan Lee because they don't know who signed it. Another reason why you can get a qualified label is if there's anything missing from the book, like a coupon or like a Marvel value stamp that doesn't affect the story. Because CGC looks at it like, this book is not really complete, but it's not really incomplete because it doesn't affect the story. But we're going to grade it as if that coupon was there, but give it a green label. So you see a lot of Hulk 181s like that are missing the Marvel value stamp because those stamps were put there specifically for people to cut them out. Then let's jump over to the dreaded purple label of death, the restoration label. So there are many different levels of restoration from amateur to professional. Amateur restoration, what you typically see is color touch. That means a spot on the cover that maybe is supposed to be black, and let's say it got faded or it got ripped and someone tried to cover it over with a black Sharpie. That's going to get a restored label of amateur restoration color touch. Then you could go all the way up to professional. Let's say that there was a big chunk missing out of it and somebody used a technique that basically added to the cover and made it 90 degrees again. The leafing, I think is what it's called. Or if there's glue on there anywhere. CGC defines it as any attempt to repair a book so that it looks like what it looked in its original state. So you have professional restoration is labeled A1 all the way to amateur, which is C5. So there's a different scale. Restoration is only really accepted in the collecting community for golden age books. Books that are very old and were restored to improve it. If you see a modern book with color touch, that's trash. There are plenty of modern books that are unrestored to where getting a restored copy is worthless. It's called Purple Label of Death because oftentimes people submit a Silver Age book or a Bronze Age book not knowing it has restoration, comes back restored, instantly tarnishes the value of the book. Green Label and Purple Label books both sell for significantly less than their unrestored Blue Label counterpart. The next thing I want to talk about is CGC Conserved grade. I feel like this is a newer type of grade that they came up with. It has a blue label, but with a gray kind of border on top. And it's similar to restoration, but it's not done to repair a book. It's done to preserve a book. So there's really nothing wrong with it, but somebody has taken steps to ensure that it'll stay in this condition. And it's typically done with big, high-end books. I've seen an Action Comics one that had a conserved grade. There's tear seals that they can put near the staples to prevent this old comic book from getting rips, staple replacement, and certain kinds of cleaning. So those are the different things that can be considered a conserved grade. This is a very rare book. I've never even seen one in person, but it's a label that's out there. Really quick, I want to highlight that any of these green label, purple label, gray label can all be combined with signature series. So you could have a yellow label that has qualified, that has restored, has conserved as well. Basically, maybe somebody had restored a book and then they got it signed, witnessed by CGC. Or let's say it's missing a Marvel Value stamp, but they still had it signed, witnessed by CGC. Boom, green and yellow label. Before I get into kind of the gimmicky labels, I want to touch on 3 labels that you might see. They're still unrestored universal blue labels, but the first one we're going to talk about is no grade. It has an NG on the top left corner. So if this book is missing the cover or missing half or more of the interior pages, they'll slab it, but it's not going to be graded. It'll just get a no grade on there. It's kind of like you just want to have it preserved. It has a fake cover, what do they call it, a facsimile cover or something like that. They slab it, but they don't grade it. Then you have individual page. You have PG. So they will grade, they will slab an individual page. Let's say you have a page from Action Comics #1 or Captain America #1. Super expensive book, but you have a page of it. They'll slab it up for you and slap that PG on the top left. Then they have cover only. I've never really seen this one, but it's what you think. They'll slab just the cover for you. And looking at CGC's description, a good example is if you send an Amazing Fantasy 15 and it looks like the back cover doesn't match the front, because they all had the very similar back covers in those days, they won't grade it and they'll just slab the cover for you. I mean, very rare. I don't know how you would try to marry that because you'll be able to see it on the spine. But anyway, that's out there. Now, before I get into those gimmicky labels, I do want to talk about page quality. I know you probably notice on a lot of these labels it says white pages or off-white pages. Here's a quick little kind of chart from Overstreet, which was CGC before CGC. Like, they were the ones that determined the value. Anyway, so white pages is obviously what you'd want. That's the best page quality you can get. And it really only matters in like copper to, older books. So you could have white pages, you could have off-white to white, you could have off-white, then there's tan, then there's cream, brittle, and that's kind of the one you want to stay away from. Brittle means that it can be damaged. Like if this page was touched, it could disintegrate. So you want to stay away from brittle pages if you can on these older books and get as close to white as possible. Some collectors will pay a premium on certain books for white pages. Some collectors won't buy a book if it doesn't have white pages. For example, I had a New Mutants 98 CGC, like a 9.6, but it had off-white pages. 99% of those books probably had white, so why would you buy that when you could just go buy a white pager? All right, so gimmicky labels, right? The first one that I remember being created was the Stan Lee label, and I thought it was pretty cool. You can get a signature series book signed by Stan Lee, and you could have requested this specific label that had his little logo with his signature on the label, and it looked really nice. So that was like the first one that I noticed. The second one that came out, and I could be wrong, but the second one I remember coming out were the Walking Dead specific ones. So they had a couple different ones. You had Michonne, Rick, Negan, you had a zombie, and you can get your Walking Dead books signed, blue label or yellow label, with these custom Walking Dead blood splatter labels. They're actually pretty cool. They have a Valiant specific label that has like the Valiant universe on there, black and white. It looks pretty cool. You can see this was an example for Britannia 1. Most recently, Marvel has come out with 4 different type of custom labels where you can have the Hulk, Daredevil, Venom, Thor. There's also Spider-Man ones, Iron Man ones. So those are new type of gimmicky labels that are out there. Here's one with the whole Avengers team on it. The last one I found was a George Perez Sirens one. So I guess this would be, you know, just custom for those books. It kind of adds to the book as far as the aesthetic. The last thing I want to talk about is that CGC has gone through 3 iterations of their label design. Here is the original label, how it looked. And actually, Unrestored used to be red label. Then it turned into blue label, and this is what the old one looked like. Not very pleasing to the eye. Here is an example of the old label next to the mid-generation label, which is when I got into CGC books. And you still see a lot of those ones around. You don't really see the old label as much. And then, of course, you have the new label, which is like in a lot of these examples that I showed you guys, which has a bigger grade on the top left. The page quality is under the grade as opposed to under the title of the book. And that's going to be it for CGC. CGC does not have the red label anymore. CBCS does have that, and they use that for their verified signature program where they didn't witness his signature, but they were able to authenticate it through whatever means they use. CGC still doesn't do that, and I respect them for that. CGC does have a census. They keep track of every book they've ever graded that you can go in there and check and see how many there are. It doesn't really take into consideration books that people have cracked open and had resubmitted unless they provided the old label with it, which not many people do. And that's going to about wrap up all the different types of CGC labels. I hope this was an informative video for you guys. You know, it's mostly for newer collectors, but, you know, maybe if you've been collecting, you might have found some things out that you didn't know about. As far as the process to submit to CGC, it's pretty easy. You set up an account on their website. You would print out the form and fill it out depending on the books and the year and the tier and all that stuff, and you would ship it to Sarasota, Florida, and you would get your books back some months later. You know, that's one way you could do it on your own. You could get it done at conventions where they're there, or you can deal with people who press books, which is kind of a topic for a whole nother video, but we'll save that for then. Thanks for watching, man. You guys hit that like on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more daily content. You know, we have a wide variety of comic book related content. It could be informative videos like this, or just reviews, or, you know, statue unboxings. And if you're already subscribed, man, consider joining the membership with that join button there, where there's 3 tiers of perks for GemMint Collectibles members. I appreciate you guys watching and taking the time out of your day. Stay minty fresh. Peace.